Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Alexandra Greenberg, and this is Insight into Wellness. Today, our topic is communicating with our animals, the unbreakable bond between people and pets. I'm speaking with Ute Luppertz, an animal consultant and coach. Ute facilitates the bond between people and animals. She is a holistic healing coach for animals, a senior pet specialist, a pet death doula, and an animal communicator. Ute's work is deeply spiritual and a transformative mission that inspires her every day. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Alexandra. I'm so happy that we get to do this.
It has been a long time coming, little
Yes.
bumps in the road, but
Yeah.
I met you years ago now at a health fair where I invited you to be there, and I was so happy because, insight into wellness. We talk about wellness for ourselves, and that usually resides in the human world. But today we're talking about animals.
Yes. How exciting is that?
So exciting, our furry little friends.
Yeah.
I would love to start at the beginning. When did your relationship start with animals, and when did it become something more? When did you sense that it was becoming your life path?
Okay. This is a fun question. So a lot of people who work with animals, they would tell you, and it's true, it started when they were children. They always had a connection, and that was actually not true for me. And
Hmm.
believe it or not, this is a very different angle. My relationship with animals started actively when I was about 10 years old and a big dog bit me in the face.
Wow.
So it wasn't like that I had a dog or a cat and I grew up and was all great. I was a city kid. We had the occasional hamster, but that was not right. And then when this incident happened, now I completely understand why the dog did what he did at the time. We visited an uncle of mine who had a farm and he had a new dog, and the dog protected the cows, the baby cows. And I didn't understand that. Right. So the dog was very ferocious and very protective. And I was 10 and I didn't know what I was doing. And then I decided I'll never deal with animals ever again. Right. So
Oh.
a traumatic experience. And then fast forward in my adult life, I started working with special needs and alter able children, which required me to, it was really fascinating because I had to kind of understand how do you function when things are different for your channels of perception, right? And then one day, a stray cat found me, and this was one of those moments. Something had happened, a friend of mine had died, and that was a very deep experience. And I thought, oh my goodness, it was like an existential loneliness experience
Mm.
moment. And then literally someone, walked by my house and said, does this cat belong to you? And I said, no, but if you don't find a home, knock on the door, I take care of it. So long story short, this kitty found me. And in this karmic moment of profound grief, because it was a young person who died, it wasn't someone who was old, right? In this profound moment of grief, I had this little soul literally knocking on my heart's door saying, hello,
Mm.
there's more to life. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I downloaded Cat 101, right? And I actually recognized that there was an aspect or a part of my soul, for lack of a better description, where a window was there and I didn't know I had a window, and that window opened and I'm like, oh my goodness. So I had this whole background of altered perception of children, and I over time translated that to animals.
Mm.
Just saying, okay, what do I do if I don't have a normal way of speaking or hearing or seeing? Or if I'm on what we call nowadays the spectrum, where, I just have a whole different way of functioning. And I'm not saying children and animals are the same. We have a human design and animals have different programming. Cats have different programming, dogs do, etc., etc. And when this cat came into my life, shortly thereafter, I got her a boyfriend because she kind of liked me, but she also wanted another cat. And then learned, and I was a special needs cat with health issues. So I learned a lot about that. And then this long, historic trauma that was dormant in my psyche resurfaced, that I thought, okay, what is this? And dogs are very different than cats. And I discovered that this trauma had resolved itself, actually. I was always kind of like, I don't want to deal with dogs. It's just not my jam, right? And underneath was this childhood trauma. And then when the cats occupied my house and my heart, I just noticed that this trauma had dissolved, literally, okay? And that led me to the next step. I continued to work with kids. I started learning about animal care and about animal stuff. Okay. And then was another pivotal moment when the world's most abused pit bull entered my life, my dog Shiva. That's when I had to do some emotional rehab. The cats were like, okay, lady, you're great. We love you. It's a great hotel. But we know we were worshipped in ancient Egypt, right? And then when my dog came, he was so wounded. It's a real, he was so wounded. If he had been a human, he would probably would have ended up in the psych ward under suicide, right? And that's when I started to do healing work. I learned a lot about sensory integration. I did a training and became a T-touch practitioner. Right. So when you introduced me and you talked about it's a deeply spiritual mission, that the work that I do, it is, but it also is very practical, as in I can be as spiritual as I like. If my body isn't functioning, if I'm not healthy, if my animals aren't functioning, if they aren't healthy, all of the spirituality goes out the window. It has to be a marriage of both.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that launched a whole avalanche of exploration when he came many years ago. And since then, a lot of dogs graced my life and a whole bunch of cats also. And I was very focused, like I used to, when I used to work with kids, about the rehab aspect. How can I make you function? How can I support that? And I'm still really passionate about that. The whole spiritual component, the soul component, the connection and the communication, that being attuned. I was in the closet about that for many years because I was really worried that people think, oh, woo-woo lady shows up.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the interesting evolution for me, because it actually started with fear, like really. And I never in a million years would have thought that I would be with big dogs that bark. And also some of them have issues with people when I work with clients.
Well, I'm happy that you have been able to be your truest self and share your truest gift. And hopefully we can get into some a story, one or two, in just a little bit. One thing when I knew that I wanted to talk to you was really understanding the relationship that animals have to us, that we have to animals, but then animals are they're their own entities. And so, and in terms of humans, relating to animals can be so personal. We all have a different level of how we relate to our animals, specifically when it comes to end of life for an animal. How do you start the conversation on the human side around preparing for this emotional time?
I really want to know where people are at in their own journey, so I don't throw spiritual lingo equation, but say you come to me and you say, my cat is old and he or she might get sick, or we have a little bit of a decline, and it's not like the active phase of hospice support for an animal. What I usually say to clients, if they find me that early in the game, I don't want to be morbid, But if you have reason to assume there is a predictable decline, like as of now, we don't know how to reverse cancer, certain cancers, just an example, right? It might change, but as of now, certain cancers have a very predictable outcome, as in eventually it's fatal, as of now, okay? And then I suggest to clients who find me that early to really prepare for the what if scenario. And some people think like, oh my God, I'm like, no. Now everything is still fairly normal. You know, you can tend to yourself, you can tend to your family. It's not a high maintenance situation where you have to have a lot of vet visits or do in-home care or whatever it is. And I usually recommend to people to get all the information they need at the end, way before it happens. And that could be that you talk to a veterinarian about euthanasia, if that is something you consider, which is what is assumed in the mainstream culture. And I'm not saying it's good or it's bad. I'm just saying this is a very likely option. And if you know, unless you're really like, I never ever would do this. And then I say, okay, then do something else. But we are assuming that most people opt for euthanasia. Okay. And so I might say things like, talk to your veterinarian and ask them, would they come to your house if you live in the metro area? What are certain things you want to have in place at the end of life? What do you do with your children? If you have children, what do you do with your partners? What do you do with the other pets in the house? And in my case, I might have a Google folder with phone numbers, with pricing, with emergency phone numbers, so that I don't have to deal with that when I'm in a really
moment.
situation, right? The one thing that is also really important from my vantage point is that when we have humans die, there is a whole thing where we connect with them. With animals, inadvertently, we objectify them more often. You know, we talk about them, we talk to other people about them. And when I do intuitive sessions, a lot of animals, they share with me that nobody told them what's going to go down when they have that final appointment, you know, and they're not people. We aren't talking to them like we talk to toddlers. But I say, really connect with your animals and say, okay, there is a likelihood that we schedule your death. Okay. And how can I prepare myself? Because I sometimes say there are two big events in life. It's birth and it's death. Everything in between can be drama or entertainment. When you give birth or when you witness a birth or when you experience death, it's the great catalyst, meaning it can flush a lot of unprocessed emotional material to the surface. So just acknowledge that, okay? And then how can we treat this as a sacred opportunity? That doesn't mean we don't grieve and we don't lose our bearings, because it's part of life that we have these emotions, right? But in an ideal scenario, when we have what I call the luxury of a prognosis and not a sudden death, which is a whole different beast, think about the what if scenarios, plan A, plan B, plan C, ahead of time if you have that time. Okay? If you have that time, sometimes we don't. And then how can you attune yourself to your pet and see how are they journeying when there is an illness, and how can we support them? Sometimes there are tendencies with people to over interpret what pain is like, or to under interpret what pain is like, because animals hide that. In the world, don't complain to your girlfriends. You don't survive, right?
Yeah.
That's a very practical aspect of, if you catch it early, what can you do so that when you're very involved in the end of life care and relationship, that you don't have to deal with all of that stuff. Ideally, it's not always possible. Yeah.
Yeah. And now, on the flip side, if you are able to be with a pet before death, how are you working with the animals?
Um, it also, so if someone contacts me and this is my dog, these are my dogs, making sure nobody walks by my house. Excuse me, Pablo, hold on, he's on the cat tree. Pablo, hey.
This is just something we work with our animals. We love them at all times.
Yeah, we do. So with an animal, I just check in with him or her, and I have a certain process that I utilize in a session to see, okay, how much are you already previewing, and this is the upper chakras, how much are you previewing being out of your body? Where in your body do you feel stress? How do you sense your person is doing? They are often very worried about us.
Hmm.
And in some cases, when people are open to this, I don't do anything without people's consent because that would be inappropriate in my opinion. I might preview with the animal what it actually feels like when they're dying, physically and energetically. And I've had a lot of death in my house because my hobby is taking in senior pets. And it can be an incredible experience when you release yourself from pain and from a dysfunctional body. Okay, so we might just preview things, we might take inventory. Often we think we are the only ones making decisions, we are the only ones being worried. And I'm like, no, that's not the case necessarily. They hold a lot of space for us. They know us often better than our significant others. They just don't speak in English.
Yeah.
So, and when I'm saying previewing and assessing, okay, where do what does it mean when you retreat with your energy? And what does it mean for your person? Because it doesn't mean they love us less. It's just, the separation of the spirit, the soul, whatever you want to call it, and the body means I retreat. I might engage less, and often there is such a relaxing peace for animals when I come into the picture saying, it's okay. You can release. I will translate that for your person who loves you so much and is so close and is so involved. Well, do you want to be part of this?
Come to us. Come to us.
He's one of my residents. Yeah.
Oh, bonjour, puppy.
Yes. Yeah.
This closeness that I actually don't have any pets currently, but a lot of friends, a lot of my clients have pets. And specifically now during COVID, pets have become extremely attached to their human counterparts. What's important for us humans to know and to understand um, when dealing with our animals, when we have to begin that separation again, or when we have to begin work, or we just can't give ourselves to our animals the way we might have been for the last several months?
I would practice things. Say, your dog has been, for dogs, they are more like us in the sense of having separation anxiety, right? So when you say you were at home for months at a time and now you can go back to the office or wherever you work, right? I would just practice leaving the house for 5 minutes, saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then I come back and we say, oh, look, it's all okay. Make it as cozy and as safe as possible, right? And there are many specifics which might lead into too many. It really depends on the family situation, on the temperament of the animal. Yeah, we don't want to do anything cold turkey. We want to make it safe and cozy and fun. There's so many things we can employ. There is soothing music for dogs. I mean, you can use any kind of soothing music, right? But there is a particular brand of music designed for dogs' nervous system that is really fun and beautiful and nice to watch. Like with my little stinker dogs here, when they get really agitated because they are concerned about something, I might do some sensor integration, meaning, you know, some dogs like thunder shirts, other like calming remedies, some might take a CBD treat for pets, or it totally depends.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the best thing is it's like when we wean ourselves from anything, you know, a substance, food, comfort food that we know is not good for us. I say, okay, do it slowly so that you can teach your psyche and your body that it's okay, that we can live without this. And with animals, you know, I really think it depends on how anxious are they in the first place? How much have they picked up from us?
Important.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, say you were home 24/7 and suddenly you have a 10-hour high-powered type A job, you might want to really stage that for your animal. And that totally depends on the family situation. You know, do you have access to a pet sitter, you know, what have you? Nothing cold turkey. I mean, does that make sense?
Slowly. Oh, of course. Slowly. As we would for humans as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The difference is that we often expect from dogs that they're supposed to toughen it out more. And I'm like, how many years did it take us to toughen things out that had to do with abandonment issues or separation? Come on, people. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
take it a little slow
Just a baby step.
and stage it a little bit.
Yeah. There are so many animals coming from shelters with really debilitating challenges like anxiety. Um, how do you communicate with humans who want their pets to do well, but maybe don't know where to start?
My first question is, are you willing to acquire skills? Okay.
Mhm.
So, enrolling in a good obedience class would be one skill, which is there are a lot of good people who do that. You know, if there are health issues, no, you need to go. No, if you bark, I have to put you down. Yeah, you can stay on my lap if you don't bark.
If he has something he wants to say, I mean, feel free to communicate that
he's
through.
just he's just trying to be a police dog, but police doesn't take him. He's too small.
He's
I'm
too
like, what? For those of you who don't know, I have a Chihuahua on my laps.
young.
So, you know, it is really about acquiring a toolkit. And I also want to say for the record that yes, we have shelter pets that have been traumatized. I also work with people who have designer breed, lineage, something. And in essence, you never know what you get. It's like when you have children, you might have two kids and you go like, same DNA, same parents, why are you so different, right? So there is this expectation that if I say I get a pet from a breeder and we know the parents, and sometimes it's the case, we have a more predictable temperament, and that is true in many cases. And sometimes you get a messed up mutt from the shelter and the dog is a rock star. You know, the bottom line is, what is your belief system? What within that belief system works for you to acquire tools? Don't just throw it on the pet.
Mhm.
I mean, it's like when Pablo, who's on my lap right now, when he came to me, he was a shelter dude and he had a lot of not so nice nicknames from the rescue. And he was a pretty intense little guy, you know, and we just took it very slowly and I applied all of the skills that I have. And I had a pet hospice group at my house at the time, and they were scared of him because he was like, ah. And then I put him in what I call a Tita trap, meaning I put something on his body like you would do with a screaming baby.
Mm.
He calmed down and people said, oh my God, I should try this. I said, yes, try this instead of yelling at your dog, right?
Mm.
So it is a lot less about communicating. It is a whole lot more about what are you willing to learn? And where would you like to start? Versus just looking at the dog or the cat and say, something is wrong, fix the other one. And I'm like, no, I have to start with myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This bond that we have with our pets, I mean, we help each other. It's not just a one-way street like, oh, I'm getting this dog from the shelter. No, that dog is helping, is helping that human as well. And it's just so beautiful that we have these connections and to treat them as such, to treat them with beauty. I was hoping to end our conversation with a story, something that really cued you into your wonderful powers of working with animals. And yeah, if you have a story to kind of share on how when you spoke to an animal or communicated or was in touch with and how that worked out.
So I have many stories, but let me give you the biggest one that was also a catalyst for me. And this is my dog, Shiva. So there's a whole book that I could write about how he came to me, which I won't get into right now. But Shiva was a middle-aged, scarred, scared to death pit bull when he came to me. And in those days, pit bulls weren't transferred to fancy rescues, so he would have not made it out alive. And he didn't have that name. He chose that name. And as you know, the name is very powerful. And when he was with me, I did a lot of things to help him heal, and he did a lot of things for me that changed my life, really. And for the years that he spent with me, I at times saw this aura around him. And I didn't recognize it as such, but I had this, sometimes there was this fleeting thought he might not get very old. And it turned out he was only 9 when he died, which is not very old for me, And there were, so he went down hard and fast.
Mm-hmm.
Turned out he had very aggressive cancer. And there was this whole experience preparing for this. And I knew it was a huge and important time. And he was in the ICU of an emergency hospital. And I just said, please come home. I need you to be with me and the cats here at home, right? And this was the time when I was already practicing rehab for animals, but I wasn't doing animal communication or any of the spiritual end of life work, right? And I got him home, he clung to life for another day because I said, I gotta have you home. I don't want you to die in a steel cage. This is where I got you from. I want you to die here at home with us, right? And so he came home and I had everything prepared and I had this idea, I meditate all night and blah, 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 and all of these great ideas. And there are great ideas, right? And then my vet came to the house and he passed away here in my living room. And I can tell you that was incredible. And the very moment my sacred dog took his last breath, I literally heard a voice in my head. And normally I don't have voices that dictate what I do, but I had this epiphany in this moment where I kind of heard him say, girl, stop the crap and go to work. This is the work you're supposed to do. And you don't have to keep my body here all night long, which I do with a lot of my pets who die. And after his death, I started doing hospice support. Right? And then people said, oh my God, how are you going to get over this? And I'm like, I don't need to get over anything. My dog released his superpowers when he passed. He did. And this was like, 100 years ago. I don't remember, but right now. But I have been connected with him ever since. And as I said, he was this really, it was a really dark story when he was at the shelter, right? And the message that I received from him is that he said, okay, I was one of the lucky ones. I made it out. And I will be one of the threshold people for all of the animals who die at shelters, not because they're sick or old, but simply because the shelters are crowded, because they are the wrong breed, or they have a bad rap sheet, or whatever. Okay. And so that was the catalyst for me. And then many years after his death, I did a hospice workshop for pet people. And in that group, I didn't know this at the time, was the director of a very small Oregon shelter. And she felt something in the way I presented my work. And eventually, I ended up doing a special ceremony in the euthanasia room of the shelter with some of the people who are mandated to euthanize animals. And they have a picture of my dog in that room. That's his mission. And that's a pretty powerful mission, I would. Yeah. And that catapulted me out of the closet with the spiritual aspect of the work. And I'm forever grateful.
It sounds and is a really important reminder for all of us to listen to our truth and to listen to that communication that our animals are freely giving to us. And whether you are in tune with that, you want to be in tune with that, or you don't want to see that as a possibility, that bond, that communication is there for you and is there for all of us. And thank you so much for sharing that story. And sweet Shiva, hi Shiva, where you at? Where you at? Come say hi. I want to thank you so much, Ute, for joining me. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled that I could do this with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And you can listen to this and more at GreenTreeAyurveda.com. Thank you so much for listening.